Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Caris May, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Warrant Officer Cherie Thayers. We warmly welcome the family of driver John McGrath, whose story will be read shortly. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony from around Australia. During the ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family and visitors. But to commence this evening's ceremony, I invite you all to stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Could you please stand for the National Anthem? Thank you. Thank you, young people. You may now be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where family and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed at the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and other operations for over more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to driver John McGrath, who was killed while fighting in France during the First World War. John McGrath was born in Dungarvan in County Waterford, Ireland in 1887. On the eve of the First World War, he was living in North Melbourne with his older brother Lawrence, working as a gardener. McGrath enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force in Melbourne in July 1915. After a period of training at Seymour Camp, he embarked for the training camps in Egypt with the reinforcement group for the 8th Light Horse Regiment. The Gallipoli campaign had ended by the time John arrived in Cairo, and the AIF spent the following months training and reorganising in preparation for the fighting on the Western Front. As part of the doubling of the AIF, John transferred to the newly formed 4th Division Artillery and was mustered as a gunner in No. 48 Battery, 11th Field Artillery Brigade, before sailing to France in June 1916. As soon as the brigade arrived in a relatively quiet nursery sector near the town of Armentières, McGrath was transferred to the headquarters company as a driver, where he was responsible for supply and logistical support for the brigade's needs. McGrath was involved in major actions involving Australians on the Western Front throughout 1916. The 11th Field Artillery Brigade fired in support of the Australian trench raids at Armentières sector and bombarded the German lines in the actions at Fromelles. In July, the brigade moved to the fighting on the Somme, where it fired in support of Australian troops at Pozières and Mouquet Farm, then spent several weeks in Belgium, where the Australians were relieved after 7 weeks of heavy fighting. In November, the 11th Field Artillery Brigade returned to the Somme to take up positions near the village of Goudicourt, where the AIF spent winter, the coldest in over 40 years. Fighting had come to a standstill in this sector, where cold, rain, mud and trench foot proved to be the greatest enemies. The German artillery constantly shelled the Australian firing line and searched for the field gun batteries from behind the front line. On the 30th of December 1916, McGrath was inside one of the 11th Field Artillery Brigade's dugouts when it was struck by a German 5.9-inch howitzer round, colloquially referred to by the troops as a coal box. The resulting explosion collapsed the dugout, killing John and another man. Aged 30 at the time of his death, the location of his grave was never formally identified. Today, John McGrath is commemorated on the Australian National Memorial at Villers-Bretonneux, along with 10,738 Australians killed in France who have no known grave. His name also appears on the Roll of Honour on my right, among more than 60,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember driver John McGrath, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Could you all please stand for the ode and last post?
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub of Gallipoli, with his poor tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this evening's last post ceremony. We would like to thank you all for visiting the Australian War Memorial today, and we wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.